like
Hmm.
that. Have you played in Japan? I'm sure you have, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
How many
I
times you been
miss
to
it.
Japan?
The funny thing is, it's funny that you should even ask me that because it was almost like a slight bone of contention. Back when everybody was traveling freely about the world, right, before COVID, I would say that my biggest market was always Europe. So I'd be going to Europe 3 or 4 times a year. Whereas the funny thing about Japan and just Asia in general was that I wasn't going there nearly as often. I used to talk to Nash, and Nash would be like, "Yeah, this is my 200th time over there." But with me, it was always one trip every few years. So the last time I was in Japan was November of 2019. And that was also my first time there with my own band. So we had a great tour then. But prior to that, I think the last time I had been to Japan was with the Mingus band, and that was probably 2014. And then before that, it was with Jimmy Heath and Tootie, and then and Cyrus Chestnut, and that was maybe 2011 or something like that. So I mean,
Oh,
I don't go that often, but
well,
I mean,
that
I've
that
been going. I started going to Japan in 1997.
that what you've described is exactly the way the Japanese music system works, and a lot of people don't understand
Mm,
that. And the only reason I got to travel to Japan so much because I played in the Count Basie Orchestra, and they were one of the
mhm,
few acts that went every year and sometimes twice a year. But the
mm.
European music industry and the Japanese music industry are completely different established. And so you played with the Mingus band, which always to me had the heavy hitters. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
and I'm impressed with the fact that you were so confident about your playing. You seem to know at a certain age
Mhm.
I can play. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I think that helps because I mean, and especially in an environment like the Mingus band, you couldn't be timid, right? Because a lot of it was also, if you were going to solo, you better hop up and solo, or else, it's like speak now or forever hold your peace. Because it wasn't. I mean, there were certain songs that there was an understanding that this person was always going to solo on this song. So whether if we're gonna do Jump Monk or we're gonna do Moanin', first of all, just historically that was Pepper Adams. So therefore that means that whoever's playing baritone sax, which is Ronnie Cooper, is gonna take that solo. Um, what would happen in that band more times than not was all the fast songs, the fast kind of burnout songs in F minor were always kind of fodder for the trumpet solos. You know what I mean? So, and if you really wanted to get up in there, you have to hop up and sometimes cut people off. So it was you learned that aspect, which isn't necessarily the most polite thing, but I think that somebody like Sue, she kind of thrived off of that kind of cutthroat energy in a way. It's weird. There was no kind of polite like, oh, can I solo on this one? No, it was just like you go ahead and do it. So that's what I learned. But also the other thing is that I've always uh there was a point, even I don't know that I even entered college with the mindset of not wanting to present myself. So I was always daring. The only thing that I needed to do was just catch up on the harmonic aspect of it. But I would go and sit in and play in a minute. That wasn't the problem. I didn't have any reservations or any qualms about not doing it. It was just, you know, was I prepared harmonically? And, in those earlier years of college, yeah, the answer is a resounding no.
Yeah, I get it.
But by the time I got to New York, I got that shit together, and yeah, yeah, I wasn't afraid to jump up and do that,
But how many hours a day
and
would you
be.
be able to practice trumpet at Berkeley years? Those years.
Well, I think most of my practicing was done during the breaks, because you had. I wasn't a practice room guy. It was funny because at a music school, and I get it, but at the same time, I was just like so against going to a practice room. and they didn't let you practice in the dorms. You couldn't practice in your room, right? Which I always did. So I mean, I'm sure if you look at the log of complaints, in the RA, you'll see my name and room number, because that was frequently when I would do my practicing within the room where I was comfortable and where I had my records and everything. But I would, I was never the I'm going to go to the practice room and work this out for hours guy. Um, it was during school time. It was either me practicing in the room or going down to Wally's, which is a jazz club in Boston, and just getting my ass handed to me until I started to learn some things. But also with that, um, yeah. So on the break, so when there would be Christmas break and you have a month off or something like that, or 3 weeks or whatnot, then that's when I would heavily be practicing, and especially in the summertime. Um,
Uh,
the summertime would be like 4 or 5 hours a day, which doesn't seem like much, but as a brass player, you can't really. And I tell people that, because I think it's a romantic concept, somewhat, when you start to think about, envision like people like Freddie or Dizzy or Miles practicing 8 hours a day. That shit never happened, because you would be dead. I mean,
uh,
having that kind of metal to your face that time is that's not what you do as a trumpet player. So it, when I say 4 or 5 hours, there were breaks, but it was also very intense.
no, no, I get that because
And
I grew up around my brother, and he played in the Air Force Academy Drum and Bugle Corps too. He
yeah,
went on to do that for
yeah,
Colorado Spring in 19, geez,
hmm
19, I don't know what it was, 1971 or
hmm
something. But yeah, he always told me about that. That like
yeah,
that's because I would sit around sometimes to practice 6 to 8 hours a day. But he's like, trumpet players can't do that, my brother. And he said a lot of my practicing I have to do in my head. You have to learn how to practice in
yeah.
your head. You know.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say, was that, the other thing about practicing, which I consider myself to do more so than anything, even to this day, is listening, is complete listening, and sometimes it's listening to things that I've been listening to for 30 years, and I might, catch on to something new and be like, okay, So I mean, I feel like it, once you get past, you get the foundation of stuff down, then what's left is really the conceptual things that you kind of start to develop and start to pay attention to and put together in your mind. And so that's where I'm at.
That makes perfect sense. So, tell me about your experience playing with Vincent Heron. He's one of the strongest, in my opinion,
Hmm.
strongest alto players since Cannonball. Well, just pure
Hmm.
power and finesse. But I've
Hmm.
always enjoyed seeing the two of you as foils together. What's it like to be up there playing those tunes with Vincent like that? And how has he helped your career with any advice?
Well, I tell you what, he's probably there's a handful of musicians that I could count as somebody that have been, uh, cheerleaders and champions for Jeremy Pelt, right? And he's right up there. I mean, when you ask a question like how has he helped my career, I mean, it's just somebody that, when I met him, he was very excited because his favorite players are Nat Adderley and Freddie Hubbard, and he recognized in me, my reverence for not only those players, but a bunch of other players, and also the fact that I knew a lot of the music. So I mean, when we did that Cannonball Adderley group, um, I was I originated the chair in that band, the Legacy band, and one of the reasons why was because I was strong enough to play that with Lewis Hayes and not have any kind of back down. And Lewis is a type of person that responds to energy. So if you're timid playing with Lewis, he has no use for you because he's gonna barrel over you because that's the kind of player that he is. He gets that from Art Blakey, I'm sure. You know what I mean? And so because I listened to so much of not only him with Cannibal, him with everybody else, and then Art Blake and all that, though I hadn't had the experience of playing with Art Blakey or him or Lewis Hayes or Elvin at the time, I already put myself in that mindset, which was that I'm going to be the type of player that can play with those type of cats. And so that's one of the things that Vincent has also. I mean, Vincent, as you very well know, is not necessarily the player that's, he's not Paul Desmond. And no, and and no kind of disrespect to Paul Desmond, or I'm just saying in terms of light sound, and I mean, Vincent puts everything into that sound, and and it's driving. So the time is a very big thing, and I think as much as he does get that from Cannonball, I think arguably he gets a lot more of that from Freddies, because Freddie is actually one of Vincent's favorite musicians. Period. You know what I mean? Um, so I can, from the 20 or so years that I played with Vincent, I know that his time, as much as it's been affected by Cannonball, it's been affected by Freddie, and so I think the thing that he likes about when I was in there was that I was coming straight strong out of that vein too,
Uh-huh.
and I still do. I mean, so when I'm thinking about playing, time is a very important thing in terms of how I present my ideas. And when you have a foil like that, um, that makes for a much better. It makes you play stronger, right? Because if I were a different type of player that was playing under the beat, or or unsure, Vincent's just gonna steamroll. I'm gonna get steamrolled twice. It's gonna be by Vincent and then by Lewis. You know what I mean? So you had to be that type of player, and I was that player from the jump. You know, and so I think that's what it is. But in terms of how he's helped me, certainly, I mean, he put me on some of my first recordings when I got to New York.
Mm.
I was on a few of his records, whether I was ready or not. And of course he's famously, was the one that hooked me up, with Lewis Hayes, and we did that band. And whenever he would have, I mean, still to this day, but I mean, uh, there was a point where Vincent and Carl Allen had this label that they were producing for a Japanese label, and so he had a very astute, very strong business mind then, and I think that carried on into a lot of other endeavors. So he would every once in a while get these kind of big ticket types of things where he was going to produce an artist, and so he's putting together recordings, and he would always call me for them.
That's great.
So I would do that. I would, yeah. So I mean, there's a lot that he did.
Yeah, Vince has been really kind to me too, and I got him as a sub in the Basie band, actually playing second alto
Hmm.
a few times. It was just a joy. I wish I had more video of it. And then he came back later after I left the band, and it
Hmm.
was a lot of fun, And he knew a lot of the cats,
Hmm.
and he also talked to me because I asked Vincent about how can I, and I'm always looking to improve my time feel, because playing in big bands is a completely different thing after you start to lose that small group concept. But
Hmm.
Freddie Hubbard was who he mentioned to me too. I knew he really loved Freddie Hubbard. I remember years
Hmm.
ago I used to have that Jackie Mack record, Bluesnik. You remember that one?
Sure. Yeah.
I'll be honest. I used to skip over over Jackie's solo on Bluesnik to get to Freddie's solo.
I think I don't know of many saxophone players that I haven't heard a story like that about Freddie. Everybody that I've heard will say the same thing, and it'll be at the expense of somebody that's as equally as iconic. So
Right,
I mean, Vincent told me about the first time he heard Freddie. He went to go hear Joe Henderson,
right.
and as soon as he heard Freddie, he forgot all about Joe. You know, I heard Justin Robinson was saying the same thing about running the sessions over at the Blue Note, and how much of an impression that Freddie left. So I mean, I get it.
It's deep, man. I transcribed most of that solo off of Bluesnik, and then I started to think about what Vince told me later about Freddie's time. You know, if I want to get my
Mm-hmm.
time together, there it is right there. Also, there's another record with
Mm-hmm.
Dexter Gordon. They're playing "It's You or No One." You know, the famous track off of what
Sure,
I can't remember
sure,
what
sure.
right.
Doing all right.
Again, man,
Yeah.
doing all right. Again, man, Freddie's
Mm-hmm.
solo, man, it's like a to me, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a perfect statement. It's time, it's fluidity,
Mm-hmm.
right in the pocket, swinging and hip. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
leaving enough
Sure.
space at the same time. And I've
Mm-hmm.
listened to a lot of Freddie. It's just astounding to me. And I got to be around him a few times to different big bands or whatever it was, and see him in
Mm-hmm.
person. But and honestly, I kind of wish I could have seen him play more because I agree with that, man. That's
Mm-hmm.
wow. You know, sometimes he would roll over the
Yeah.
saxophone players in the band. Remember that? You know,
Yeah.
just roll over them. I used to watch the videos and go, "Oh no,
Yeah.
no, he didn't."
Yeah.
You know, man, that was some
Yeah.
stuff, man. You know, this kind of thing, and hanging with Frank Foster was also something that helped my career a lot too, man. I mean, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
he was leading the Basie band when he first got me in there, and he was like a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
as you know. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to a lot of the young cats that come out of the universities now, and things have become so technical and so organized and such a pedagogy. I'm missing some of that old swagger, some of that blues, some of that church, some of that soul. Do you think we'll ever get it back, or is it gonna is it gone now?
I think it's gone in the way that you remember it, and the way that I remember it. This is something that I've thought a lot about, and I've asked a lot of other people about it. But I think that I in the way that we could put on a record and listen to this here, right? And you hear Bobby Timmons, do 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 do, and they just going for, yeah, that is gone. Whether it's ever going to come back, I don't think it is. But I think that there's a different type of soul that is being played right now that could be equally compelling, but it certainly doesn't exist on a university level. You know what I mean? So in that case, it's wiped completely clean because I mean you can't really teach that, and that's just what it is, and it's always been what it is. You're not gonna teach soul. You can sit over here and be like, listen, man, I need you to play this like beep, beep, but if you don't get it, I remember one time I did something with this. I'm not gonna say who the musician was, but it was just some funny shit, man, because this cat tried to notate uh, a soul lick. I'm sitting over here trying to, and the thing about this music is that it's an oral experience. I'm not gonna say who it is, but I mean this cat was definitely white, and here I am trying to read this shit, because he's got it all these different turns and andantes and this trying to replicate what the sound is, and I'm just like, man, I can't even believe I'm sitting over here trying to read some shit, you know, and that's where it's at, because I think at that level, it's more important for them to be able to notate it than for them to do what is the right thing, which is to sing it to you. You know what I mean? When I learned those songs, I remember even when I was learning um what is it, moaning, you know, and I remember even Roy took me aside. He was showing me how Bobby Timmons wrote it, how it's supposed to be on the piano, and just seeing how it's phrased, it gives you an idea of how to play it. So, I mean, I think that on a university tip, they're not really, they can't teach that type of thing. You either got it or you don't, and the way that you really get it is by the listening portion of it. Um, yeah, I mean, there's some cats that are gonna, put forth an effort and do their own version of a soul. So I'm not gonna ever sit over here and say that it's just non-existent, because that would just kind of be betraying my craft. I mean, it's there. It's just not. It's just less people have it than before.
I agree. Was that Roy Haynes or Roy Hargrove?
Oh, Roy Hargrove. I mean, yeah, this was like 25 years ago. We were sitting there and he was playing the piano, and you know,
Right.
yeah,
Roy definitely had that feel, man. He definitely had that.
absolutely,
He had it at a
absolutely,
young
yeah.
age, man. It's like,
Hmm.
but one of the biggest things I learned from being on the road, like playing with Lionel Hampton and all these elders, I was so fortunate to meet and play with, is that the playing experience was all aural, like you said. It was an aural music. Plas Johnson, I met
Hmm.
Jackie Kelso, all the, Frank Foster, and all the people in the big band who used to play with Basie. They basically said they
Hmm.
played jazz at one point in their lives almost 24 hours a day.
Well, but I think I don't think that is the system is, well. I'm not gonna say system. That's a weird word. I don't think that it's set up, is designed for us to see it that way. I mean, I think that's just evolution, man. I mean, it would be weird, as a matter of fact, to if somebody's gonna come around right now and try to recreate something or have something that sounds Mozart-ish. You know what I mean? Because that's not where the music. I mean, the music has departed. The evolution of classical music has come so far since then. And I think it's the same thing in jazz. I mean, the more and more I think about it, it's like you're not supposed to have anything else that's going to sound like Ellington or Basie. You know what I mean? And that's, I think that in a sense is a good thing, because then that should hopefully lead people into coming up with something that certainly carries that as an inspiration, but also leads you into finding your own niche. And also, one of the other things that's, I feel like, important to that story that you were talking about, the 300 nights a week, is that there's 300 nights a week. We're not even in that. I mean, jazz is not nearly as popular, right? So, economically speaking, yeah, I'm sure if anybody, even if you got the squirrel nut zippers, or any of these, that work 300 nights a week, I'm sure they would be killing. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, so. I mean, I think a lot of that. I mean, I know. Matter of fact, I know a lot of that it comes down to dollars and cents. I mean, there was supply, there was a demand for work for 300. I was talking to Paul West. I was like, how many? He said he worked with Dizzy Gillespie's band. They worked 42, 45 weeks out of the year. You know what I mean? I mean, that was back when business was booming. We don't have that now. You know, I do think that there are bands that are out here that are doing their best to try to get to that. But it's a harder thing. And it doesn't necessarily. I mean, look, even if I think about my favorite bands back in the day, like Roy Hargrove or Terrence Blanchard, I mean, they weren't working no 300 nights a week, but they were working a lot, enough to where they had that same kind of closeness,
Right.
and that's why they sounded as good as they did. So I mean, it's always so. I think what replaces those 300 nights a week now, quite frankly, is having the right chemistry of musicians that want to give it their all, and, as you said, put that extra something on that note.
Right. Yeah, we had
Hmm.
and then you remember coming up listening to Funkadelic and Parliament and James Brown and Earth, Wind and Fire, Chicago, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
whatever spectrum, Beatles, Crosby, Stills,
Hmm.
Nash and Young,
Hmm.
Brothers Johnson. There was, and then you had the smooth jazz with David Sanborn and Grover Washington, Ronnie Lodge. Remember all that stuff, and even that
Hmm.
was
Sure.
funky and popping. It was just
Right.
a different world. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, what it was they were bands.
There were
You
bands.
know,
Thank you.
yeah, that's what that's another thing too. And I think what happened, aside from all that, especially in the jazz world, is that you witnessed, particularly towards um, the the late '90s, you started to witness this phenomenon of, first of all, mixed with the fact that the business wasn't as booming as it used to be. What that meant was that all these promoters started to get scared and they're trying to drum up money. So they got rid of the bands and put together these all-star groups, right? With the concept of, okay, yeah, let's just, throw anybody in there. And so you had this weird looking group of musicians that were certainly great musicians, but I mean, do they really need to do a whole tour? What the hell are you playing? It doesn't even make any sense. I had a meeting with somebody 2 years ago that was trying to put together a kind of a quasi all-star band and have us do the music of somebody, and or the music of Bjork or some stupid shit. I'm like, come on, man. you know, so people are putting these concept bands together, trying to, to piggyback off of a famous artist. So yeah, if we do the music of Bjork, then you're gonna have all these Bjork heads come out, you know, and then we stuck with doing that shit for a year and a half or whatever.
That's true. That's an excellent point about the bands. So, Jeremy, before we cut off here, and it's been a pleasure,
Hmm.
can you tell people about your latest projects, your latest recordings? What might the future hold? Where can they find you? Anything like that?
Absolutely. And this kind of runs hand in hand with what we've been talking about. I've got two things that I'm very proud of that are going to be coming out. Uh, so first is my CD that'll be coming out in February, February 12th, as a matter of fact. And the name of the CD is Griot. This is important. That's the whole name. Griot. This is important. And the premise of the CD is that it's well, let me backtrack. I started writing a book that's going to also be coming out, and it's going to be a companion to the CD. And the name of the book is also Griot, examining the lives of jazz's great storytellers. And in that book, it's a continuation of the tradition that Art Taylor had back in 30 years ago with Notes and Tones, in which they're all musician to musician interviews. And in 2018, I set out to start to interview all these living legends, and then I went to different generations and just interviewed all these black artists about their lives and their stance on black uh politics, well, not politics, but black social issues in America. And so that is something that I amassed over about 35 interviews. And so I'm releasing these books in volumes, and the first volume is coming out in February. So now, when I did those interviews, and when I talk about the interviews, I did interviews with Wynton Marsalis, Harold Mayburn, Larry Willis,
Hmm.
Bertha Hope, Paul West, Warren Smith, Louis Hayes, Kenny Barron, George Cables. I did all these people, and then and then I went to different generations. So there was also Robert Glasper, J.D. Allen. There was Lewis Nash, Peter Washington. I just interviewed Nasheed Waits today. Terry Lynn Carrington, Renee Marie, Tia Fuller. So I interviewed quite a few people to get different perspectives. And with regard to the record that's coming out, Griot, this is important. I took some of the sound bites from those interviews of musicians, and I wrote music to the sound bites. So the featured interviewees on the record are sound bites from Paul West, from Renee Marie, from J.D. Allen, from Harold Mayburn, and from Ambrose Missouri. And so, each person has like a song that's kind of written to um, their statement that they have. So what you'll in turn hear is the statement and then the song. So that's all coming out next month.
That's great, man. I
Yeah.
know what griot is, but please tell people who might know, might have to Google what it in the African American
Yeah.
community. That's very important. So please.
Right. Yeah. Well, griot in West African history, it was a storyteller or poet, musician that would come to the villages and tell stories um, of of the past and impart those stories to the villagers. And the idea was that the history is carried on from generation to generation like that.
Right. That's right. I played in the Black Rock Coalition for a little while. You know, with Living
Hmm.
Color. I played with Michael Hill's Bluesland, and griot was very
Uh,
important to Michael Hill. And his songs
hmm.
were always about storytelling. And I think he even wrote that. So I wanted people to understand that. And that's how a lot of ways we spread our African history and our African knowledge. And it's much
Hmm.
different to hear the history than it is to read the history. That, for instance, when
Hmm.
my grandmother told me about being born on a plantation after emancipation,
Hmm.
well, it wouldn't have been the
Hmm.
same to have read that, but to have her
No.
tell it to me, so.
Well, and that's one of the things that you'll find in the introduction that I wrote for the book was it was the original part of the inspiration for writing the book in the first place was this two things. It was chief amongst them was the fact that I used to grow up with my grandparents out here in the Bronx, and particularly with my grandfather, I used to sit on the couch and every summer and listen to stories after stories that he was telling, anecdotes after anecdotes of how it was when he was a kid, and they would be vast. So some of them would be funny little anecdotes, and then others would be very serious, like the fact that he had to escape Virginia for protecting his mother against a white mail carrier.
Mm.
So he might have been lynched. So he never went back to Virginia his whole life after he left as a teenager. So you had things like that, and then what happened was that when I was a teenager, they sent a tape and they recorded. There was one side of the tape was my grandmother telling her whole life story, and the other side was my grandfather telling his own life. So I mean, they're passing that information down, and like as you said, and you hit the nail right on the head. It's one thing uh, when you read it, and it's another thing when you hear it. You know, and unfortunately, I can't. I'm not going to necessarily release every single interview that I did from an audio consumption, but I think that one of the things that I'm very proud about, and I think one of the things that's effective in a musician to musician interview is how you can kind of uh, get information that a regular, a writer that was unattached to them couldn't get. You know what I mean? That was always the magic about notes and tones. You know what I mean? So when you read Art Taylor, I mean, it hits differently when Art Taylor's interviewing Dexter Gordon rather than Leonard Feather or somebody like that. You know what I mean? You and the Tribe.
Right.
So Dexter, he'll crack jokes or whatnot, but then also have some knowledge to drop on you because well, this is you, my main man. You know,
Mm.
so
Good. Man, what we all look forward to that, man, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I appreciate your
yeah,
time
same here.
today, brother. Try to stay
Thanks a
safe,
lot.
and I hope I see you soon, man. It's just been crazy.
Yeah,
I don't even know what to say about all that, man. So,
nothing too sad at this point.
nothing to say. All right,
All right,
brother. When I hit
all
this
right now.
button, the plan is gonna go away, but I'll edit the video and I'll get it up as soon as I can, my friend. Thank
All
you so
right,
much.
I
The
appreciate
great
it.
Jeremy Pelt, ladies and gentlemen.
Bye.
All right,
Bye.
bye.